Welcome to another episode of People in Transition. I'm your host, Bob Gerst. Today's conversation is especially relevant for anyone who looks successful on paper but feels unsettled, burned out, or quietly questioning what's next for them. My guest is Mallory Byers. Mallory spent nearly a decade as a top performing sales recruiter at Salesforce, helping some of the most driven professionals land roles at the highest levels. She knew the hiring game inside and out. But along the way, she noticed something that changed the direction of her work. Even the most capable, accomplished people weren't stuck because they lacked strategy. They were stuck because something deeper was running the show. Old patterns, nervous system overload, and a version of confidence built entirely on performance. Today, Mallory is a career breakthrough and empowerment coach who works with high achievers navigating career transitions, burnout, or layoffs. Her work goes far beyond resumes and interviews. She helps people strengthen the person behind the strategy by rebuilding self trust, regulating the nervous system, and untangling subconscious patterns like people pleasing, perfectionism, and overfunctioning. Through her signature one on one program, The Inner CEO, Mallory helps clients stop outsourcing their worth to job titles and start leading their careers with grounded authority. Because, as she teaches, you are the CEO of your life and your career. If you're in a season of transition or sensing that the next chapter of your career requires a different version of you, this conversation will resonate deeply with you. Welcome to People in Transition. I'm so excited about our being together today.
Absolutely, Bob. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Melanie, let's dive right in. I think that our listeners would be curious to know what led you to this line of work.
Mhm. Great question. So, what I will start with, what led me here is I was my first client. And what I mean by that is that I was in a high power role, looked very successful on paper, and I actually loved my line of work for a while. And then something shifted in me, and I just was continuing to stay in the role because of clout, because of what it looked like on the outside. But my soul was it was being soul sucked, really. And I spent years chasing the next promotion, chasing the next leadership, whatever it might be, to kind of quote unquote fix what was lacking. And lo and behold, I went through a layoff and 9 years at Salesforce, blindsided by this layoff. It took me out. And what I mean by that is that my identity was tied to my performance, to my job. I didn't know who I was without Mallory Byers, recruiter, Salesforce. Like, who was Mallory? I did not know. And that alone was enough to make me pause and be like, shoot, I need to really go within. And I've always have been a self-development junkie, if you will. Like, I love self-development. And when I was recruiting and working with candidates, I was always working with them on a deeper level. And so after the layoff, I did some deep inner work and I got to really get to know myself in a new way because I got to really uncover the subconscious blocks that kept me in a role that I was no longer fulfilled by, but stayed anyway. And when we're thinking about career transition, so much of that plays into kind of what we do next because of fear, because of scarcity, because of imposter syndrome, right? So when we can really break down the doors of what's actually keeping us stuck, we then can start to create what's next for us in a very aligned, grounded way. So this work for me is so powerful and so potent. I've been through it. So it's not just me teaching a principle, it's also lived experience and studied.
I can so relate to what you talk about here. I had a position that was the head of human resources for an organization that had thousands of employees. And
Mhm.
when they decided to restructure and I was out of the position, it does knock you out. And many people never come back from that. If we then take that and kind of bridge your former career at Salesforce with your current philosophy, and we really think about that person behind the strategy idea,
Yeah.
when did you realize that the strategy alone wasn't enough? I mean, was it a
Yeah.
an aha moment, or did it take weeks, or for you?
Yeah, well, actually, it's a great question. It actually clicked because after the layoff, I did what most people do, freak out, go start applying to everything, which is as a recruiter, you don't do that. Like, let me just tell you, that's not what you do. But my own scarcity came through, and that's what I was doing. And it was at the same time that I started to learn more about coaching and what that actually meant. And I had a job offer that was just as much money as my old at Salesforce. And I had a decision to make. It was, do I start my own business or do I do what I've always done and kind of take the safe route? And it was in that moment that I realized that a part of why I stayed so stuck for so long was that I didn't trust myself. And it was that moment where I was like, this is it, Mal. Like, we get to step into your power or just do what you've always done. And that was the game changer for me. And no, it wasn't easy, of course, right? Like, so much comes in after that decision. But when I look back on my life, am I going to feel more proud of taking that job that I knew was soul sucking for me, just that energy, or be more proud of what I'm doing now that's actually changing people's lives from the inside out? And so that ability to really truly trust myself, I mean, that's like on my wall, all of it. I come back to daily of like, what would I do if I fully trusted myself? And then you have to start to take action to that desire.
Both yourself as well as your clients look very successful oftentimes on paper, but they really feel very stuck.
Yep.
And so something's going on inside, some emotion, some feeling, something is happening beneath the surface. Can you name it and articulate what that is so that we can see it in ourselves or see it in someone
Yeah.
else?
So the way that it often looks, so let me just take a step back. We in survival strategies when it comes to our career. We're in like a scarcity mindset or we're in a people pleasing. We want to please the boss. We overthink every decision. We're rewriting emails or resumes endlessly. We avoid interviews or we avoid networking. We obsessively compare, right? Or we avoid conflict. We tell the boss, sure, I'll take that on when you know you're at capacity. All of these are survival strategies that we learned early on in childhood that have subconsciously now manifested into how we operate as adults. And this is the connection point, the bridge where when we learn to actually heal what's going on, why I feel like I need to people please, why I need my boss's approval. Because if I don't get it, then I feel a lack of love. Like there's something deeper going on that, again, we learned in childhood that we have to address. And once you address that, then you start to create strategy for what life looks like when you're not bound and held back by these survival patterns. So I'm going to pause for a second because I know that this concept it's deep, right? However, this is where imposter syndrome lies. This is the fear of failure lies, the fear of success lies, right? Like there's all these different things that come up that keep us stagnant in our career that look great on the outside, but we know deep down like we are meant for more, but we just stay where it's safe.
Does it happen to everyone, or are some people immune to this destabilizing?
This is what I'll say. If you were a child and you had parents, whether they're deceased, whether they were around, whether they weren't around, whether they were great, whether they were terrible, then yes, this applies to you. So it applies to everyone. We all have nervous systems as well. And when we are operating out of dysregulation, we are not fully in our power. And so I want to talk about what that actually looks like. Because when you think about somebody that's really successful on paper, it's easy to be like, wow, they're so regulated. Look at what they're calling in, all that. That's just incorrect. Because if they are afraid to turn off at the end of the day because, a deal will go south or whatever, or they're not spending time with their family, that again is dysregulation. That's them feeling that the only way that they are empowered is through success and through what they do and through accomplishment. And when you are so connected to that, that's dysregulation. But when you are centered from a place of like inner knowing, inner power, it's a next level of success that you actually get to welcome in. And there's so much money there too. It's not like you have to choose, like, oh, do I have to just be like a calm, regulated person with no money or a dysregulated person with all this money? It can be both. And you're calling in the most aligned, most clear version of you so you can step into your power.
Mallory, I think that I have seen job seekers display this kind of, I can't turn it off. Finding my next job is my job now, and I've got to work the same 60 hours and attend every meetup session and every networking opportunity and actually burn themselves out even in the job seeking process.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. And that's so common, right? Where if you lack a job and you think that you need to do whatever it takes to land the job. So a moment or one networking event you miss, one interview you decide not to take, you're like, I'm never going to land a job. I have to do everything. But again, that's operating from dysregulation, and you're not actually operating from choice. I think, especially in the world of layoffs, something that happens is for most of us, we don't mean to, but we start to take it personal, right? You start to analyze, well, maybe that one day when I wasn't giving 110%, that was when my boss decided I'm going to be part of that layoff group, right? So it's like that again, that like I have to do to be accepted. Does this land? Does this make sense?
100%. And I've so been there. You oftentimes have said that this isn't a confidence or mindset problem, but rather a nervous system problem.
Yeah.
Can you help us understand that a little bit better?
Yes, 100%. So, look, if this was all just like a mindset issue, then affirmations would work all day, right? But they don't because the body doesn't believe them. So when someone's nervous system is dysregulated, they may think they're capable, but their body doesn't feel safe actually acting on it. And that shows up as hesitation. It shows up as over preparation, perfectionism, freezing, really in those critical moments. And really, confidence isn't something that you think your way into. It's really something that you feel when your system is regulated. Once you learn how to actually settle the body, that's when clarity comes. That's when decision making comes. That's when natural leadership actually start to come back online. So that's really what I mean when it's not a confidence or mindset problem. It's a nervous system problem.
So this dysregulation of the nervous system You've talked about some of the symptoms, if you will, for
Yeah.
that perfectionism, overthinking, and so forth. Are there other things that I should be on the lookout for in my action that says that I'm in that state?
Yeah. So, what I would say, scarcity, 100% is a sign of dysregulation. I would say if you are kind of a busy bee, but kind of going nowhere at the same time, where you're just like in that do, and you have to accomplish, that's also a sign of dysregulation because what's happening is your body doesn't feel safe to slow down because it thinks it's in danger. So that's definitely something. That sense of fight or flight, right? Where if you are in like total freeze mode, or if you're getting overwhelmed very quickly, because sometimes that overwhelm of like, oh God, I know I'm not meant to do this anymore, but what am I supposed to be doing? If that is overwhelming to your system, we freeze. And so we don't actually move the needle, or we'll just kind of go back to what we know. But when you're calm and regulated, what happens is you start to get creative with, wow, this is all that I've done in my career. Look at how this can apply to this industry, to this role that I've never even thought of, to maybe starting my own business. Like there's a different type of clarity that comes back online when you are regulated.
So you've talked about that inner child
Yeah.
patterns,
Yeah.
the people pleasing, the perfectionism, and so forth. Have you seen this play out in people's careers? And do they generally recognize it themselves, or does it take someone from the outside to see these kind of behaviors display?
Yeah. So I'll start with like, does it take somebody to guide you through? Yes and no. I definitely want to empower people to do this work. However, we sort of get stuck in the awareness phase, right? Of like, oh, I'm super aware that I'm avoiding conflict or overfunctioning or whatever. And then it just goes straight into change. But that doesn't actually create lasting change because there's a something is going on within the body that's bracing for impact. And that is where having a trained professional points out the blind spots, points out the subconscious and how it's playing in kind of your day to day. So, for example, when you think about how inner child work kind of shows up in our careers as adults or even in leadership, it drives our behavior as professionals. So I know I mentioned people pleasing, but people pleasing often, it comes from that early approval, that approval equals safety, right? And perfectionism comes from believing mistakes are not safe. Or what's another? Like over responsibility often comes from having to grow up too fast. And so those things that happened in childhood start to take hold in leadership, like avoiding conflict, over functioning for teams, doing all the work yourself. And again, back to tying self worth to being needed or indispensable. When we start to address the inner child, the adult stops leading from this survival state and starts leading from actual choice. And that's when boundaries, they really start to strengthen and presence really deepens and authority really becomes embodied instead of forced.
What are
Yeah.
some of the changes that you've seen when someone stops trying to tie their self-worth to their job title or to the output? Good
So,
or bad
yeah.
outcomes, I guess.
So, and I'm so glad you asked that question because when I started this work, or I should say before I started doing this work, I used to think I don't have time to regulate my nervous system, or my inner critic is so loud. That's actually what makes me successful. Quiet her, then I'm going to become lazy, or I'm not going to be able to make the amount of money if I slow down, right? And so, as far as what I've seen with clients, is when they start to do this work, I mean, I have so many amazing examples where they are stepping into their power, whether it's in the interview, whether they're negotiating, whether they are actually changing industries for the first time. I've seen this also be powerful in relationships, relationships with their children, relationships with their partner. Like it's one of those ripple effects that affects all areas of life. But I think the biggest thing when it comes to careers is when you step into your power and you're not letting someone else's experience dictate how you show up, whether that's a rejection, whether that's not getting the big promotion, whether that's a deal that goes south, and you are able to really stand tall in your own self, you get more deals because you're not like overthinking everything, or you're not being like, God, I'm such an idiot, could this happen, oh, I should just go back to what I know and just go, back to my old job, right? It's being able to really have a different relationship with self, and that again is the ripple effect.
Melanie, you've worked with many people who have gone through layoffs, and
Mhm.
unfortunately, that's the times that we're in right now. What are some of the common patterns that you've seen in how high performers respond to that layoff notice? And what would you suggest that they do to make those behaviors be a more positive experience?
Yeah, it's really interesting because especially with layoffs, when you're a top performer and you get laid off, that's really confusing, right? It's like, what? And I think that the biggest thing that happens is that we subconsciously or consciously be like, well, I got laid off. I have to stay in this same line of work. I have to stay in the same vertical or industry because I was let go, right? It wasn't my choice. And so that I think is the biggest challenge that most of us have experienced when we're in a layoff of like, okay, let's look at my career. What am I really good at? Doesn't matter if I like it. What am I really good at? And let's just do that. And then it starts to have this negative ripple effect where maybe you land the job in a role that you're not really that excited about, but you tell yourself the economy, it's just the right move, all of that, and but you don't have a plan for getting out of it. I get it. Sometimes you need to just have, we call them a bridge job, as you are creating your next big thing. But if we don't actually step into our power at that point, you're going to find years later you're still in that bridge job. It's honestly about getting very honest with yourself, and that's hard to do with full confidence. I being one of them, where when we start to get radically honest about what we want, what we don't want, what we feel worthy of, what we don't feel worthy of, a shake within the system, within our world. So it's learning how to get really, really honest with yourself, even when it's scary.
Mallory, you've talked before about replacing that inner critic with the inner CEO.
Yeah.
Can you help us understand what does that transformation look like and how do I put that into practice?
Absolutely. So the inner CEO is designed to remind you that you are in charge of your career. Whether you're an employee, a leader, or a CEO, like you are the one that is in full ownership of your career. Even if you're waiting on a yes or a no from a company, right? You need to be the one that is sort of dictating your next move. And I think so many of us have learned to be employees of our own career. Like the company tells you what it is that they think that you should do next, right? It's a very clear career ladder, but you are not taking agency or ownership of that. So the inner CEO is the one that actually knows what he or she wants, that moves with clarity and conviction in what it is that they want. And they are not letting their mentor or managers or company dictate what's next for them. right? So it's really about confidence in who you are and what you bring to the table because it's what I've seen, and especially now more than ever, where careers, it's changing, right? Like our worlds are changing when it comes to careers. And so now more than ever, it's so important to be in the driver's seat of your career, right? Where it's like it is your duty to take ownership of your career. And it's scary sometimes because we're so dependent on, well, are they going to accept me if I'm applying for a job, this, that, and the other? But it's like, okay, if they don't hire me, that's okay. It's not aligned in some way that maybe I can't see. Something else is coming, and you're going to put in the work to get it.
Mallory, is there a mindset shift or some kind of exercise that you could introduce to our listeners that maybe you've used in your coaching process that helps create that mind shift and gives some kind of immediate impact?
I love that because it also is just showing how as society we are just looking for the quickest fix. And I get it, right? So what I'm going to say when it comes to mindset, anything around that is you're only working with half of the puzzle. You've got to get into your body. You have to start to cultivate safety. And that comes through learning how to regulate the nervous system and then working with the mindset. Because if you're just working with mindset in a dysregulated nervous system, it's not going to up level you. What I will say when it comes to mindset is if you're thinking about your career, just start with this exercise of just ask yourself, what would I do if I was not afraid? And just start to jot things down. And you're going to start to get clarity on if it's fear that's misaligning you, if it's fear of not stepping into your power, like what is it that actually is holding you back, and work from that place. I want to start my own thing, but I'm afraid I won't make money. Okay, the fear that you won't make money, we have to work on that limiting belief before we can expand you. You see what I'm saying? It's like we've got to get to the root before you can call in what's next.
Mallory, we've covered so much really great information, and I really do appreciate your sharing and highlighting some interesting parts of someone's journey as they're transitioning jobs. If our listeners remember one piece of advice for navigating transitions with clarity and self-trust, what would that piece of advice be?
Yeah, I would say the big thing is that you don't need more pressure. You just don't. You need more safety in the body. You need to learn how to get out of these survival patterns. And just a reminder that clarity does not come from forcing a decision. It really comes from when the body is settled enough to hear what's already true. So, for something that feels heavy, urgent, or panicked, that's not our intuition. Like, it's just not. That is survival. And so, that is your signal right there to slow down, to regulate first, and know that you're going to get to your clarity from a calm state. Just to remember that if you are in transition, it's all happening for you if you let it.
Thank you, Mallory. And for my listeners, I really do hope today's conversation with Mallory fired you up and gave you the push to take bold steps in your own career. You don't have to face change alone.
No.
Together, we can turn uncertainty into momentum and momentum into results. This is your time to lean in, to get clear on what you want, and go after it with confidence. Let's start building that future you've been dreaming about. Your next chapter is waiting. So let's make it happen together. Mallory, thank you so much.
Oh, you're so welcome. It was such a pleasure to chat with you. Thank you so much.